Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So we have to talk about the 13 keys model for the presidential election because a lot of people have been talking about it and a lot of people have been asking me, what do you think about this professor Allan Lichtman predicting Joe Biden to win the election, which is exactly what he's doing. And we're going to talk about why I believe that this is misguided. And like I've said before, the 13 keys are a general guide. It can be interpreted whichever way that you want to interpret it. It's very subjective, and that is true. But again, this does not necessarily mean that just because they've been right in the past, which again, they've been wrong several times in the past, like in 1932, like in 2000, where he literally had to change his own model just so it would fit. It's not entirely true, and it's not the best indicator that one can use to predict a presidential election. And you could look at this here. Allan Lichtman, the professor who made the 13 keys model, basically is saying that Joe Biden is going to win because there's no serious contest for the party nomination and that Joe Biden is the incumbent president. And the problem with that is the fact that Biden might be the incumbent, but his approval rating is in the gutter. And that's been a historically accurate indicator for what the president usually gets in the popular vote. It's basically been off by a couple of points, and definitely the popularity of the opponent or there being third parties in the mix technically showcases the fact that, it's not always a benefit. It can also be a drawback if you have a record like Joe Biden has, and the record is awful. And that's what a majority of Americans believe, and that's kind of an issue. Now, you could say the incumbency is kind of an advantage because he can enact policy that could essentially buy votes more so than somebody who's not in office. And technically that's true, but that's not entirely what his key is based off of. And just because Biden tries to use his executive power, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a guarantor that it moves the needle in the here and now. So I think it's important we look at this model and kind of understand why Lichtman's prediction is kind of based off of his own personal bias more so than him viewing the situation objectively, because I know that I am biased. Everybody has bias. Lichtman is pretending like his model is a sure thing. Meanwhile, he's interpreting the keys whichever way he wants to. And this is the same guy who said in 2017, for no reason, that Donald Trump should be impeached. That was back in 2017. He wasn't even trying to, base the impeachment off of something that the left tried to impeach him over. He just basically wanted it to happen because he doesn't like Trump. And on top of it, he's also gone out there and said that the Supreme Court ruled wrongly on the ballot issue, that Donald Trump should be thrown off the ballot. So if anything, the guy's kind of senile at this point, just like the current president. Maybe that's why he resonates with him so much. I don't know. But we can go through the keys and we could look at them because these are a, general guide. They're not entirely going to be accurate all the time. And he's interpreted them in a specific way that just doesn't necessarily add up. And even if he's getting something right, you could say that it's largely due to coincidence at certain times more so than not. And the first key shows that if the incumbent party gains seats during the midterms, that they are going to be in a better position to win the election. Now, that key is false. That key's objectively false. But even then, if you're somebody on the left even, you could look at that and say, well, the midterms were pretty underwhelming for a sitting president to only lose 9 seats or whatever in this day and age, which we could argue about that and we could place the blame wherever, but it's a little bit beside the point. Up next is no primary contest, which means that you need like somebody to get a third of the vote. And Biden in many states is not doing super well for a sitting president in terms of his primary vote share. He's getting in the mid to high 80s, but he's literally running against nobody. And there's several states where the uncommitted option is getting double digits, which is not really a good sign for Joe Biden being an incumbent president. But again, there's not like a serious challenge. It's not like you have Gavin Newsom in the running. But like hypothetically, if you did, I really feel as if Biden would really struggle, even if he would manage to win. And I do think it would probably hurt him more if that happened in a general. So I do kind of agree with that due to the whole party being divided, even though the party is kind of divided in a certain way right now, and he's not doing too well. And then the third is incumbent seeking re-election. We know that that's objectively true, but again, Biden's an unpopular incumbent. Then you have no third party, which again, how does this exactly impact anything? Because you could have a third party that's right-leaning, and that'll take votes away from Trump. You could have a third party that's left-leaning. They're going to take votes away from Biden. Like, this is a really subjective one that doesn't really seem to grasp reality, and we're going to see a higher third-party vote share than we saw in 2020 for sure. So I don't know how much that really is going to impact things, but 5 and 6, you have the strong economy because, it's not in recession, and economic growth during the term equals or exceeds mean growth during the 2 previous terms. A lot of that just has to do with COVID recovery, because Lichtman said that the economy keys flipping would doom Trump in 2020. But if you look at the exit polls, the people that voted based off of the economy overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. And Joe Biden's approval rating on the economy is not good. You could talk about these economic metrics like, technically we're not in a recession. But at the end of the day, does that exactly mean that the economy is strong or that it's a winning issue for Biden? Of course not. We know that it's not. His approval rating on the economy is in the 30s. If you think the economy is going to help Biden, that's abysmal. And then we have major policy change, which again, Lichtman is giving Biden all of these keys except the first one up to this point. He's giving him all the keys. And in terms of the major policy change, for Trump, he gave Trump the key for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. For Obama, it was the Affordable Care Act. But in terms of the major policy changes that Biden has implemented, he really hasn't implemented a whole lot. I can't really sit here and say that the infrastructure bill was enough when we're not even going to see any of that really come into action for years. And the Inflation Reduction Act, what did that do? Not really a whole lot. The inflation rate coming down didn't really have anything to do with that. And inflation as a whole is still going up. And there's been studies out of Harvard that have shown that the Inflation Reduction Act may have made that worse. But even then, is that a major policy change? It's just a spending bill. Because Lichtman basically said, Biden undoing Trump's executive orders was enough to make this key true. And that just doesn't add up to me, even if he wants to stretch that for one of those other pieces of legislation he pushed through. I mean, even then that's a reach. But still, that would make more sense than what Lichtman's reasoning was for it. Number 8 is no social unrest, which again, there hasn't really been a lot of social unrest during the term. But again, you're maybe seeing that change with the whole Israel-Palestine thing. I mean, these people are, they're not exactly rioting the way BLM was rioting, but they are protesting. Some of the protests can get out of hand. It is wall-to-wall coverage on the media. So, this one's a little bit murky, but again, it depends how you look at it. I wouldn't say we're like perfectly in a position where there's no social unrest at all right now, even if it's not like to the level it was in 2020 or even 2016. But even then, who knows what's going to happen? The summertime is just starting, and that's when you saw the unrest in 2016 and 2020. Number 9 says the incumbent administration is untainted by any major scandal, which again, you have the classified documents report, you have the Hunter Biden stuff, even though that's more of like Biden before his administration, it's still something that doesn't make him look good, even if a lot of undecided voters don't care about it at this point. But still, I mean, looking at this key, there's a lot of certain things, the Her report, you could point to a lot of things that could be a scandal, quote unquote. The border crisis, I think, is a big scandal. The keys don't even take into account the border. That's a major problem. So this one is iffy. But again, he said that Trump's scandal was the fact that he got impeached, which again, he was impeached over nonsense and his poll numbers went up after his impeachment. So how do you really chalk that up as a scandal that would tank him? Even if you want to say that there was a high degree of, scandal or media coverage that was negative about Trump, the impeachment thing didn't really move the needle. Number 10 is no foreign or military failure. Lichtman is basically saying that whatever's happening overseas is fine, and that, Russia invading Ukraine or Iran striking Israel, whatever, that's not seen as a foreign failure. And Afghanistan, which is probably his biggest failure, he's like, it was not necessarily the best look, but it's not really a failure, which again, his approval rating sank a lot after that. So again, the American public are not viewing the election the way that these keys are viewing certain things, and whoever's programming them, who is Lichtman, is not exactly programming them correctly. Number 11 is major foreign or military success. There's no real successes going on right now. Biden's approval rating on foreign policy, he's down by over 20 points. There are no major successes, but Lichtman is basically, he didn't endorse this key as true, it seems, but he basically said that, well, Biden's doing strong, holding his own in Ukraine. It's like, give me a break. Are you serious? Number 12 is charismatic incumbent. Biden is not charismatic, even if people can say that he is like the grandfather type. And even then, that's a very nice way of glossing over the fact that he's like senile or whatever. But at least Lichtman agrees that Biden is not charismatic, and 13 is uncharismatic challenger, which again, Trump is somebody who is very charismatic to his base, but beyond his base, they don't really like him. So I'm not going to knock Lichtman for saying that Trump is an uncharismatic challenger by his own definition. But again, Trump, with his base turnout, definitely is something that is something that would help him. So if you want to go through the keys and you want to talk about, 6 or more of these being false, I think you have 10, 11, 12, those are 3. 1 is technically false, that's 4. And there was really no major policy change that was positive, that's 5. And the economy is not a winning issue. There are third-party candidates that likely will hurt Biden. So what I'm saying is that the keys are nonsense in this day and age. They are nonsense right here, right now, to say, oh, well, it doesn't matter that Biden's approval rating's below 40% and that Donald Trump is leading the popular vote right now by 1 to 2 points. The keys, that's not how the American people vote. They don't take everything into account. That's why they had Herbert Hoover winning easily if you apply it to that election, and it doesn't necessarily work. So either way, like I've said, the keys are a general guide. Usually if you are an incumbent, you have a higher approval rating, which Biden doesn't. Usually if the economy is going well, presidents do well, but that's not the case with this economy, even if you're talking about, well, there's growth in jobs, because a lot of that just is COVID recovery. It's not actually benefiting Americans, and a lot of the people getting the jobs are foreigners, work visas, etc. These people can't even vote anyways. So when you look at it, the keys are not being interpreted correctly, number 1, and number 2, they're not definitive. They're not. And I will say this, lastly, because some people, who knows what's going to happen 6, 7 months from now, they'll come back to this video. If Biden wins, he can, but it's not going to have anything to do with any of this stuff. He could win, but it's going to be because of the fact that his base is higher propensity, they turn out, and maybe his approval rating recovers because of something, but it's unlikely it recovers a whole lot other than people in his own base coming home. Maybe it will be in the mid-40s by then, who knows, but still, it's not going to have anything to do with, but the keys said this amount of months out, because we understand that they don't align with reality, especially in the way that Lichtman is interpreting them. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.